There's a big transparency piece that needs to occur when it comes to the consumer. There's a lot that they don't know or that is painful for them that I think is very possible to bring to the world of the internet.
My name is Wandi Lasishi, and today I'm joined by motoring industry experts, as well as the CEO of AutoTrader, George Mienie. We'll be discussing essentially how can South African car dealerships adapt to consumer search behavior, as well as adopt automotive digital retailing. Thank you for joining us, George.
Thanks for having me, Wandi, and it's really good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And speaking about the automotive industry, there's three things that have really come out in terms of, I guess, themes, which you've seen as we've been disrupted by COVID-19 and the global pandemic. The first one being transparency. So this idea that if you give a consumer more information, they're more likely to buy a car or buy your product. The second one is this idea of data security, as well as the ability for consumers to be anonymous. And lastly, something that I know that you completely are obsessed about, and you speak about it quite a lot, is this concept of automotive digital retailing. With that being said, I want to lead to the first question, which was, if we take a step back and we look at the industry prior to lockdown, do you think and do you feel that the industry has done enough to react accordingly to the changes? How have dealerships adapted to this?
Well, I need to answer the first part of your question. We have to paint the picture of the market itself. Pre-lockdown, we were already a fully fledged digital business as AutoTrader.
Yeah.
And consumers were used to searching for cars online. Many consumers still visited two dealerships, sometimes three, depending on the age demographic of that particular consumer. However, what the pandemic has forced is it's forced more digital adoption by the consumer, because we're all in lockdown, all in our homes, and consumers were still searching for cars. What's the evidence of that? As AutoTrader, we've seen 40 to 50% growth in numbers to our website. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why? And does that mean that the automotive industry is flying? Mm-hmm. Well, as a whole, no, because we've seen a massive decline in new car sales. And the consumer switching to used cars. So in that context, the overall industry when it comes to consumer shopping has more than likely remained flat to declining. And we've seen the uptake in used car, and hence the big growth numbers. So if you contextualize this with consumers now shopping more online and using digital journeys to get to the car, you've got to ask yourself, well, the answer to your second question, which is, has the car dealership or the automotive industry or business kept up? And I think that the industry has been forced to up their game. What I mean by up their game is to employ these things called automotive digital retailing strategies, or at least begin to think about them and begin to take steps towards those strategies. What does automotive digital retailing mean? It means taking all of the systems and processes and digitizing it with one goal in mind, creating an efficient transition between a digital platform and the physical showroom, where the consumer feels like that is a smooth transition between the physical showroom and the digital platform, or vice versa. Many car dealerships have done it successfully, and those are the dealers who are going to win in the future. Some dealerships haven't changed since pre-COVID-19, and they're still seeing the benefits because they're getting a response from AutoTrader's websites. And then some dealers that haven't taken any automotive digital retailing steps are going to feel themselves in a pinch in the future as we come out of lockdown.
Yeah, I think you touched on a few interesting things there. The first one I want to talk about is just site behavior. So we've seen an increase in site behavior, but what impact has this had on the overall supply and demand? And lastly, has this changes in supply and demand essentially impacted the pricing of vehicles?
So supply and demand, I mean, the general economic model plays out in the world of automotive or cars in South Africa, just like anywhere else and just like any other product. Increase in demand for a particular make or model, and you generally might see an increase in price. Now, that's in a perfect scenario, but that's the general rule. A decrease in supply, and you're going to see an increase in price as if demand doesn't drop off. And what we've seen is an overall increase in demand by the consumer for used cars. And initially, we saw prices go up during those increased demand periods. And then we saw it level off again to roughly 1 to 2% price increases. So prices have slightly come down, but it hasn't fallen off a cliff because demand for used cars is still really high. And that's off the back of the fact that people aren't buying new cars. And the reason people aren't buying new cars is because we've seen prices increase for new cars. And now this is not a sustainable future, though.
No, definitely not.
I keep saying that the used car market and the buoyancy of the used car market is fed by the new car market. So we can't see negative territory in new car sales for a sustained period of time. Eventually, we will have an aging fleet in South Africa. So prices have been relatively flat, somewhat declined in some areas, but that's in the main or generally.
So that's a balancing act, right? There needs to be a balance for it to be sustainable, and that's what you're kind of alluding to.
Yes.
Now, something else that you pointed out is ADR, or Automotive Digital Retailing. This idea of connecting the online as well as the offline. But for a dealership who has never really touched the online space, what sort of tips or suggestions would you give to them?
Many car dealerships think that putting up forms on websites is digital retailing. And while it's a good first step, it's not quite the essence of automotive digital retailing. Digital retailing is much more than just putting up forms on a website. It is deep integration between the physical showroom, their online showroom, as well as third parties like banks, insurance companies, and not only that, but also the internal processes of the dealer. There's no point in putting up a form on a dealership website only to have that form turn into an antiquated email that some human being inside the dealership needs to follow up on. That has to follow up.
It's that experience that you're kind of talking about. You want the experience from the offline and the online to seamlessly merge together, and the consumer at the end of the day must not feel that it's a completely different or separated process.
Yes, exactly. So a good example would be if a consumer comes onto a dealer website and wants finance, for argument's sake, and decides to fill in a form based on a car they see on a dealership website and make an application for finance. That application should seamlessly integrate with the banking systems from the dealer website all the way through to the bank and all the way back again with very, very little human intervention. The moment that form turns into an email, a human has to deal with it.
Would you say that's the biggest challenge then in this process of automotive digital retailing? Would you say it's the financial insurance section, or do you think it's somewhere else in between the process?
I think finance is the biggest conundrum. That's the biggest challenge to solve. And the reason it's the biggest challenge is because of banking regulation. There needs to be banking regulation. There needs to be rules because, you can't have a financial system in a country that doesn't have regulation. So there needs to be the regulation, but on the flip side, there also needs to be transparency. And I think the journey to the right regulation with the right amount of transparency and the right amount of integration, we're not there yet. We're not quite there yet. The banking systems in South Africa are still evolving, although we're probably one of the countries in the world that has some of the most sophisticated banking systems. But integrating with those banking systems,
that's kind of the challenge.
That's the challenge, yes. We heard from dealers that validation is part of the challenge.
So on that point, what would you say then is the biggest hurdle that dealerships are having? So you're saying that this is something that other countries are sort of adopting already. So why do you think that we're having the challenge in South Africa? Or is there even a dealership that's already at the forefront of this?
So the many dealerships that I've spoken to, and some are ahead of others, are addressing the challenges. It's not very easy for a dealership to address the challenges because there's many third parties involved.
Yeah.
And integration with those third parties is a tough ask. And dealerships sell cars. They're good at buying and selling cars. They're not technology companies. And they're not marketing companies. So that mindset shift and that skill shift that a dealership has to make is
pretty significant.
Sometimes very significant for a dealership because you've got to employ technology in a world that you might not be familiar with.
In a perfect world, let's just say hypothetically speaking that a dealership was able to sort of adopt and adapt to the market changes. What sort of initial, I guess, opportunities or successes would they see from this? Outside of obviously just providing a great experience for the consumer, but for the dealership, why should they really invest in this sort of technology?
Well, one main reason is that 50% growth number that we spoke about right at the beginning. It's evidence that the balance of the consumers have come online. And COVID has kind of accelerated that. So you'll capture the attention of the in-market car shopper so much easier. And let's be honest, what does a consumer ultimately want?
They want to buy.
Speed and convenience.
Yeah, and ultimately to buy, right?
Yes, and ultimately to buy. But in that process, they want speed and convenience. It's almost like they want their cake and they want to eat it and they want it fast.
Yeah, it's a challenge that I think we've seen as a result of technology. Consumers are a lot more impatient now. They want things to be done now. They don't want to wait because I think for a business, that allows an opportunity for somebody to just get over it or sort of not want to make the purchase anymore. Yes. If you can capture them early and fully, I think that's where the biggest sort of win is for businesses. But just to summarize, if you had to give a dealership some tips, something that they can do now to sort of start moving in this direction, what would you say to them?
If a dealership, if you haven't moved ahead with a really good dealership website, start with that.
Yeah.
Start with doing an audit on your dealership website and make sure that you can measure everything. And a good way to do that is to insert Google Analytics. Make sure that you can measure the consumer journey through your website.
How they're interacting with
how they're interacting with where's your sources of traffic coming from? How is the consumer converting? Because websites aren't about just the pretty. It's about the conversion, the SEO, the way in which Google sees you, and the successes that you get out of seeing those numbers. Many dealers haven't got their sites tagged with Google Analytics, and don't monitor the journey that the consumer takes through their website. Once you've done that, then you can begin understanding what works and what doesn't work on your website, and you can begin employing automotive digital retailing strategies on the dealer website that help you to now improve that conversion, take away all of the manual processes. The second piece of advice I would give is try and digitize the internal processes of the dealership. It's one thing digitizing the consumer-facing dealer website and tagging it with Google Analytics and all those things. But if you don't digitize the internal workings of your dealership, you still have a very high human capital cost, where people have to do a lot of administrative tasks that perhaps a machine can do.
It slows down the process, right?
And then slows down the process to the consumer, exactly.
Okay, so that's very interesting. I think we've unpacked a lot of things, but how far do you think South Africa is? How far do you think consumers can start interacting with these dealerships and the industry and be able to, within the span of 10 minutes, possibly purchase a car?
So I think there's a very long tail. My sense is that probably 20% of dealers are doing it as well as they can, given the barriers that we face with potential integration with financial institutions and that integration with their websites, and not having to have a human being deal with some of those processes. So I think 20% of dealers are probably doing it reasonably well and are on the cutting edge of what's possible in South Africa. And then we have the long tail of the 80% that gradually goes down, into the right. And then we've still got some dealerships who don't even have a computer in the dealership.
It's all done offline, on paper.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a problem. But look, I think it's definitely exciting. I think there's a lot of things that we can definitely, lessons that we can take from this. And you're saying that it's not too far away. So I think at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We want a sustainable industry where everyone's winning and ultimately giving back to South Africa and the people that deserve it. So George, we've kind of touched on this process of automotive digital retailing, but I would like to understand what are consumers saying? What are the pain points that they have highlighted which we need to focus on?
So Wendy, there's a lot in automotive digital retailing. Internal leadership processes, connecting the online showroom with the offline showroom experience. So there's a lot in there, but I think the biggest thing to address next for South Africa, automotive digital retailing, and for the consumer is car finance.
Okay.
Car finance still largely happens inside the dealership. Now, I don't think that that's going to go away in terms of where finance occurs. But the point of sale of finance and the journey needs to move on to the internet, whether that be on marketplace portals or whether that be on the dealership website itself, and or both.
Okay.
Because we did a piece of research or study, and we asked consumers what their major concerns were or pain points were when it came to applying for finance or getting finance on a vehicle. And 73% of consumers said that they wanted to complete the entire finance journey online. Now, that's not possible today. There isn't an opportunity for a consumer to complete that entire journey online. 80% of consumers also said that they want to get pre-approval online. So what does pre-approval mean?
What's the process there?
So pre-approval is, I want to know whether I'm eligible for finance before I even go.
Like purchasing a house, for instance.
Yes, I want to get pre-approval. Do I need to go through all of this pain and then just at the end to find out that I can't get finance? So consumers want pre-approval.
And this is all in the online space that they're asking for this.
Yes, so they want to do all of these things online. And then 50% of consumers say that they want to understand the total cost of ownership when it comes to finance. So there is a big transparency piece that needs to occur when it comes to the consumer. There's a lot that they don't know or that is painful for them that I think is very possible to bring to the world of the internet, and for car dealers to actually close more qualified deals than they ever have before. So consumers are asking for it. Now, it's going to take some time because bank regulation, integration, dealership websites, all of that stuff will take time to solve, but consumers are asking for it today.